Hello, and welcome to another episode of David's Divergent Discussions. I'm your host, David Gray Hammond, and tonight we were going to be here with Tanya and Katie, but unfortunately Tanya can't be here, so it's just me and Katie, but it's going to be good. So we're going to talk all things neurodivergent mental health because it is Mental Health Awareness Month. I feel the same about that really as I do about Autistic Awareness Month. Like the whole awareness thing feels kind of icky to me, so maybe we'll try and reclaim it a bit. But first of all, audio descriptions. I'm David Gray Hammond. I am a white Mediterranean male in his mid-30s. I have a shaved head, a beard, a lip piercing, thick-rimmed glasses, and an ear tunnel. I'm wearing a grey t-shirt, sat next to the rickety bookcase in a room that you used to be able to see was blue, but obviously British summertime is ending, so now we're in for the dark months. So you're going to consistently find me lit by the screens of my computer and nothing else because, well, who actually turns on the big light? Like, it's horrible. Well, how can you do that? It's too bright. It's too bright.
I can't see. I don't know what I need to see.
I don't want to see anything.
Oh, well, all right. Okay, bloody hell, right, okay. I didn't realise that was the aim of the game, was not to see anything.
I'm kind of like Gollum. I occupy dark spaces best. I haven't yet hunted down any fish, but, I might find fish somewhere in this house if I buy it. Oh, look, someone's already chimed in to agree. Look, Jenny says, lights suck big time.
Yeah, but I need to be able to see.
Team lights off.
Shall I describe myself before we moan about lights forever? Is that all right? I too am wearing a grey t-shirt. David and I didn't organise this. This is just seems to be what we're both wearing. I'm a large white person. You can only see me from the shoulders up. I have really messy, short, dark hair that I really need to sort out. I got large brown and orange rimmed glasses. I'm sat on a light grey sofa in front of light green curtains, and I do have the big light on. And the big lights in our house are like LED, no messing about. Katie can't see shit without the lights on. So David and I look completely different on the screen.
Well, before we start, remember, if you like these live streams and live podcast recordings, please do share them. It really helps. And Katie, the hair. So I'm sure you said you needed to get a haircut the last time we did a live stream as well.
I know. It's the hair is, and this is related to mental health. So it's all the steps that take you to do your hair. It's not like, oh, just go and get your hair cut. It's like, okay, our hairdressers only takes cash, right? So you've got to get the cash, and you've got to be able to get there. And then you think about what time of day it is, and whether they're going to be busy or not, and what day of the week it is, and then just various other things like, am I driving that day? Like, can I be asked with driving that day? Am I walking there? And then, like, do I want conversation whilst I'm in there? And you never have the same hairdresser every time, so don't necessarily come out the same every time. So it's all these little things that you just think, yeah. And then I just end up with just like unruly hair because I just can't get the executive function to actually go and get my hair cut. And then when I do get it cut, I get it cut a lot shorter than I probably would want because I know it's going to last me longer. So,
and I think that's a good jumping off point, isn't it? Because, I'm autistic, ADHD, and schizophrenic. I do not have the executive function to, for example, anchor a bookcase to a wall, which literally has like 3 steps to it. Drill hole, put hook in, hook to bookcase. Like that, I mean, okay, you could argue there's the buying the stuff, but most of it I already have lying around somewhere. But again, I'm chronically disorganized and I don't actually lying around. And I think, and I wonder what you think of this, but we live in a world that has taught us to be really mean to ourselves about the fact that we struggle with these day-to-day tasks.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's my worst thing, like talking about hair and stuff? when someone says, "Oh, your hair's really nice," and I'm like, "This is the first time I've washed it in about a week, 2 weeks." So I'm like, "Yeah, it's just washed." And I was like, "Oh, right, okay." And I'm like, yeah, you weren't really ready for that, really, were you?" So
Yeah.
yeah, people just have these kind of expectations of what everybody gets up to and what everyone's self care looks like, and it's just not. It's certainly not the same for neurodivergent people, I would say.
I will be honest, a big part of the reason why my head is shaved is because hair maintenance is a really big demand for me. And, the last thing I need when I'm going about my day-to-day life, forgetting where I'm supposed to be and generally bumbling my way through whatever it is I'm supposed to be doing, the last thing I need to remember is to add the step of wash hair
Mm,
or style hair or, try and find something that hides the fact that I'm actually going bald on top. Like, it's just easier to shave it off for me. I just
yeah.
I I used to have really long hair, and it was a nightmare because when I had long hair, my psychosis was like in full swing. I was in active addiction. I was not a person of spoons all the time to properly care for that hair. And I'll be honest, taking that step out of my life has been really helpful for me.
Mm, mm,
Um, but I will say it's not an option for everyone because we live in a world with like gender norms because apparently that's a thing. And like I think about, for example, a lot of women can't necessarily shave their head even if they want to because there's this weird idea in society that shaving your head means you're completely unstable. And it seems to be almost exclusively centered on women shaving their heads.
yeah, yeah. Because shaved head men don't have a history of just being fucking lunatics.
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing about that at all. Yeah, I don't know. There's just as usual, women and people who are perceived as women are just set to this kind of standard that is just completely and utterly unrealistic. And not only are women and those of us who are perceived as women have to do the majority of caregiving of children, like in a very heteronormative, in a very normative manner. I mean to say, like, look after the children, do all the housework, keep the garden. Also, in this day and age, have a job as well. Oh, and also, if you can look absolutely fucking immaculate whilst you're doing all of that, and be like a size 8, that would be amazing. And smile whilst you do it too, because you're supposed to enjoy this. This is supposed to be fun.
Yeah, and actually, we've got some comments coming in about women and shaved heads. So, Tanya says, "Wasn't that a treatment for hysterical women back in the day? Shave their heads,"
Ooh,
and I believe it is. And then Jenny has jumped in and said, "You can thank the Victorians for that idea about women and shaved heads." So, yeah, that probably makes sense. And I need to do some more reading about this because I have like a morbid interest in like Victorians and mental health because they had some it's dark, but it's interesting to read about. It's kind of like
mm,
looking at an eclipse. You know you shouldn't, but you do it anyway.
yeah.
Oh, and Northern Aughty has chimed in to say, I first realised I was going bald when I noticed it was taking longer to wash my face. That is a fair point, and I've been there. I've been there. Much solidarity.
Yeah.
Um,
Don't show off. Don't show off that you're washing your face.
yeah,
What is this? Coming in here. Yeah, I'm bathing, washing my face, like whatever.
yeah.
Unbelievable.
But yeah, we've talked about the gender expectations, like layers that exist to what we're expected to do on a day-to-day basis. And it only gets more complicated when you're neurodivergent because there's either extra expectations or there are extra barriers to meeting those expectations. And
Absolutely.
then people go, oh, why are all these neurodivergent people experiencing poor mental health? Well, maybe it's because society is a nightmare.
Yeah. 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 Definitely. Yeah. I don't know if the expectations are bigger of us, but they're just unrealistic. I don't know if they are bigger. I don't think people realize that they're bigger, anyways. They're just like, well, everyone can do that.
Yeah, not necessarily bigger, but I think the way because there seems to be a correct way of doing everything in this world. I don't
Yeah.
know why. And all the correct ways of doing things that you're supposed to do in life seem to be designed intentionally to be as inaccessible as possible.
Kitty's here. Hello. Yeah, just I've totally lost the plot. Oh yeah, because I was actually thinking about this the other day, when I did wash my hair. That I just use soap now. I just use soap for everything, like, and soap for my hair as well. And then when I was younger, it was like, oh, used to like um shampoo. I totally lost the word there. Shampoo my hair, rinse it, shampoo it again, rinse it, then use conditioner. What complete waste of time that all is when it's all just fundamentally soap.
Yeah.
So now we just have soap in our house, and that's that really. And it's the same with little man as well. They've got all these newfangled stuff for Johnson's and baby this and baby that, and it's just use soap. I mean, it's still baby soap, but like we just use soap with him. His
I'm not
hair's
going to lie.
his hair's brand new. Like, what? Why do I need to be putting conditioner and shampoo and various other things on him? Like,
I'm not going to lie. I washed my son's hair with baby bubble bath the other day because I couldn't find the shampoo.
yeah,
Like, and as it turns out, he's fine. Like-
he's okay. It's all right. Yeah.
Now, you see, this is interesting. Tanya says, different perspective. I enjoy the smells and rituals. And it's funny because just before Tanya put that comment, I was thinking, like, smells are like really important to me. Like, it's like one of my most overactive senses. I smell everything. Like, I smell things that other people don't seem to be able to smell.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, the shampoo, if I'm going to use shampoo, it has to be just right. Because if it smells wrong and I can smell it on me, it's going to completely dysregulate me all day. Like,
Yeah.
and then I get caught in this whole thing of like, why can't I just shampoo my hair? Why has it got to be this big thing? And I know because I've just shaved my head and I've got like no hair, but I do still shampoo it. I don't even really know why. It is force of habit. Uh, but yeah, it like sometimes I get really wound up by my sensory differences because I look around at everyone else just kind of going about their lives and not really thinking about this stuff. And I'm constantly sort of getting caught up in this thinking of like, and it's neuronormativity. It's sort of inbuilt ableism, internalized ableism. Like, why can't I just do it?
But how do you know that everyone that I like? Yeah, there's definitely a guess there about the fact that everyone else is just getting on with their lives and not
Yeah,
smelling everything or not being annoyed by smells.
yeah,
Do you think other people get annoyed by smells? Is that just an autistic sensory processing kind of thing?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I assume that other neurodivergent people also have a big thing of poo smells, but I guess I always just maybe I'm wrong. I've always just assumed that for neurotypical people, for example, it's not such a thing. But maybe I'm making the wrong assumption. I don't know. If there's a neurotypical watching this who is particular about smells, please put me out of my misery.
Let
Um,
let us know. Yeah. No, I mean, maybe not, but I do find that I smell things a lot sooner, or it just smells that other people don't smell. Like
yeah,
other non-autistic people just don't. Just I'm just like, oh, what is that smell? Or I'll be able to. We might smell the same smell, but I'm going to be able to tell you what it is a lot quicker than anybody else would be able to.
yeah,
And I'm like that with perfumes as well, because I just kind of have to know what the perfume smells like. So when I do wheelchair basketball with the other coach, and he goes between 2 or 3 different aftershaves, and I'm like, "Oh, you've got dupe on tonight," and he's like, "How do you know that?" I was like, "Because I know what dupe smells like, and you smell like that." So yeah, yeah. Whereas I don't think everyone else. Yeah, I get a bit funny about perfumes as well because I can be a bit. unintentionally possibly quite creepy, which is really not my intention at all, because one of our trustees at work wears Sauvage, and there's a Izumiyaki one he wears as well. And I can smell. This is going to sound really, really weird. I can smell that he's in the office before I've even walked into the office, and I can smell that he's coming down the road when I'm in the office and he's not. Because I can smell the perfume, and then I just sit there going, "Oh, Drew, you smell so nice," and I'm like, "I can't, just shush, just stop saying these things to like our 65-year-old trustee." Like, it's probably a bit weird, but he's just looking at me like,
I smell people. I've just embraced it. Like,
yeah, like, sorry, I'm just gonna have to tell you smell nice. I mean, if you didn't want people to think you smell nice, don't wear
don't
really
smell
expensive
nice.
perfume.
Like,
You know what I mean? Like, just rough it like the rest of
it's
us.
like wearing a Dr. Seuss hat and expecting people not to comment on it. Like,
Yeah.
but it's going to sound like we've gone off on a tangent, but watch me bring it back.
Here we go.
So Northern Naughty says, like sound, I usually have to be in control of the smell. I make super noodles. It smells great. My partner makes the same thing. It makes me sick. And actually, yeah, this is really important to neurodivergent
Mm.
mental health, especially if you're autistic, because having control of our sensory environment is in our well-being. If we're being bombarded with sensory experiences that we find, let's say, traumatic, it's that autism plus environment equals outcome thing. You know, we're going to feel worse if, you know, being in that sort of environment where we have no control and it's just one horrible thing after another, it's no surprise when we don't cope with it well. Whereas for me, like for example, I'm sat in a dark room at the moment, but later it will have galaxy projectors. I've got an oil diffuser. I've got LED lights. Like I make it look like a nice sensory space for me. And for me, having that space is really important to my mental health because one of the things that causes a great deal of monotropic split, as Tanya would call it, I'm waiting for Tanya to chime in the comments now. Things that causes that monotropic split for me, where my brain is trying to focus on multiple demands at once and can't cope. Sensory stuff, it's I can't cope with that sensory stuff. It just overrides everything, and it burns me out quicker than anything. And you know, whilst being burnt out isn't necessarily the same as you know, a mental health condition in itself, it can lead to worse mental
Mm.
health outcomes.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I find that I have that with sound, but not anything else. Smell will distract me, but sound will I'll just completely and utterly lose it. So if there's like another conversation going on in the office and I'm in the office, then I'm just like, I can't, I can't do this anymore. Like I need to put earplugs in. Or
Yeah.
even if I'm having a conversation in my brain and then someone interrupts that to talk to me, oh, yeah, completely. Don't know what I'm doing anymore.
If there
Um,
is too much sound for me, my brain does like the neurological equivalent of if you like jumped into the sea sort of 3 miles out and tried to swim back to land.
okay, yeah,
I
I can
don't
get
know
that.
if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense to people, but it literally feels like my brain is drowning when there are too many sources of noise.
Yeah, I would say that's yeah, I would agree with that. Um, yeah, just hear everything all the time. Yeah, and even if it's not people, it's stuff, and it's other things that people don't hear. Electricity, you know, we've got a flat above the office as well, and they're just like stuff from up there, and people can't hear it or smell it or whatever. But it's right there for me, and it just drives me absolutely completely and utterly bonkers. But when you're already struggling with brain fog, which I do quite a lot, and you know, baby brain has added to that. Oh, very very much. Um, you know, you're already trying to trudge few blimey through um like all this brain nonsense of just having a head full of like glittery spaghetti, then trying to work out what you're doing, and then add other sensory stuff to it. And it's just like, sometimes I go into the office, I do about half an hour's worth of work, and I think, bollocks, I'm going home. It's just completely and utterly pointless me being here, because I'm not going to get anything done today. Yeah.
So one of the fun things my brain does is add its own sensory experiences. So, oh, I've clicked the wrong one. Hang on. Here we go. Is that someone once recommended them a sensory deprivation tank, but they couldn't get over the shared water aspect. Well, shared water aspect aside, I'm schizophrenic, and if I am in a silent room, my brain will add sensory input that isn't there. And for me, that can be exhausting. And when it does this, like when I'm working and stuff, it's really difficult to explain to people. It's that, I guess it's like that double empathy thing, isn't it? If you've not experienced it, it's difficult to really get the experience across. But like sometimes, especially when I'm really struggling, there is no peace at all. Like I cannot get any peace. So I come in from a world that has been bombarding me with sensory stuff to sit alone in a room with a brain that is bombarding me with sensory stuff.
Mm, mm, mm. Not the same thing. But I get that. I mean, you might get this with OCD anyways, but like the intrusive thoughts of OCD
Yeah.
is very much so it's not noise for me. It is because it's me. So I hear my thoughts. I don't see in pictures or think in pictures or anything like that. So I suppose it is noise, but it's not. But it's words. It's speaking. And then obviously isn't very nice anyway. So and then add ADHD to that, and it's just like just it just
Yeah,
doesn't
it
stop.
always
It
makes
just
me
doesn't
laugh when
stop.
meditations start with empty your mind. And I'm like, is that even possible? Like,
I just fall asleep. I've tried meditation. Jay and I do a little bit of it, but I fall asleep 9 times out of 10.
you see, I like meditation, and when I'm in a good place, I use it quite liberally. But the problem is when you're in psychosis, meditation can actually be quite risky. It's not a good combination necessarily.
Mm,
Um, and because it can actually enhance your hallucinatory experiences, for example, um, which can be quite annoying because for me, when I'm in a good place, meditation is a part of my self-care practice. So then if I'm struggling, I actually lose part of my self-care practice, which makes me
mm,
struggle more. Um,
mm,
and I see there are some good suggestions coming up in the comments, like Maddie Black Lives Matter says that loops under noise cancelling headphones help them. And I know that they're good for quite a lot of autistic people. Unfortunately for me, if I'm going to put something in my ears, it has to have its own sound coming out to cancel the voice hearing,
mm,
which Northern Autie has actually said, I need some sort of noise to cancel out the noise in my head.
mm.
And
Yeah.
it's it's interesting because I think a lot of the time, um, and I think this applies to neurodivergent people in particular. When people talk about things to help with our mental health and our well-being, a lot of people approach it as if there is a one-size-fits-all approach.
Mm,
And I don't see a one-size-fits-all approach to anything like that. But in particular, neurodivergent people, everything that's been researched doesn't seem to have particularly looked at neurodivergent people.
mm. Yeah. Yeah. There's just this. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like most advice around mental health is not particularly helpful. Like I don't think it's just not helpful for neurodivergent people and not accessible to us. I think most advice around mental health is just shit, anyways. Um, and there's like loads of things that are um, based around. So I had postnatal depression and anxiety, just to go with my regular depression and anxiety, just to spice things up a bit. And all of the, and I did get some quite good support with that, but it was all it was group based, support. And yeah, actually, quite a lot of us were neurodivergent in that group, although not many of them knew that that was the case. So it worked out well in that, for instance. But I think if I'd have been in there with a different group of people, it would have been just completely and utterly disastrous. And the things they were talking about there, and just things you see online is like, taking more time for yourself, and you're like, well, I'm a parent, I work, I have like 8 million other things going on. So I don't know how people are just supposed to how are you supposed to take time for yourself? And there's just this assumption that people have like support networks and stuff like that. And just lean on this person and lean on that person. Well, a lot of us neurodivergent people don't really
No.
have that. And a lot of us are estranged from our families, or we're in kind of the care system, and like we've all got like really sorry, the autistic people I know by and large have um don't have a massive support network. And if we do, they're by and large more neurodivergent people who are also struggling at the same time as us. So it would be really helpful people to lean on, but when everyone goes down, like, who is there to kind
Yeah.
of call upon then? So I think there's all these ideas that, a hot bath and going for a walk and going for coffee with a friend, and you think, that's probably not what quite a
The
lot of
problem
us
is they
would
don't even
do.
suggest things that I would do when I'm in a good place. Like,
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's true. I mean, I can't get in and out of the bath safely. So, like, why am I having a hot bath? It's
yeah.
not what I need. It's really not. Make yourself feel better. Break your shoulder on the
Yeah.
way out. I mean, I don't know.
But
Like,
that
yeah, I'm not really.
isolation,
Yeah,
that's
Jack,
that isolation is a really
nodding his head because he takes
yeah.
me out the bloody
That
bath.
isolation is a really good point though, because we did an episode way back when I only started this like a year ago, but right back at the beginning of this podcast, we were talking about the lack of community around mental health. Like you've got the autistic community, the neurodivergent
Mm,
community. There is very little in terms of mental health community. And it always really
mm,
hacks me off that, for example, mental health services will facilitate group therapy sessions where they tell us how to interact. They won't, for example, help empower us to create our own communities. Like I think of like the autistic community as like a liberatory community. It's emancipatory. It's
mm,
designed by and led by other autistic people. We decide what we want from it. We offer the support we want to offer. We have our own morals and values that we stick to, and we all have different approaches to that as well because we're all individuals, and yet we don't get any support to do that around mental health because mental health services seem to have taken control and gone, well, if you want to be together you can, but you're going to do it our way.
mm, mm. Yeah, that's true. You don't see. Well, I'm not aware of, outside of PTSD specifically for veterans. I'm not aware of any mental health support. Well, I don't know.
I
I mean,
guess
do they exist? I mean, I suppose stuff like Men's Shed and stuff like that does exist, doesn't
I
it?
would probably move group model because there's always a bit of a power imbalance there because you
Mm,
have like the facilitator who kind of keeps
mm,
everyone in check. And I think one of the things I enjoy about the autistic community is that there isn't really a hierarchy per se. Like there's no one in charge. Like neuro anarchy. We
neuroanarchy.
govern ourselves. Um, but I think there needs to be more like health in general because so many. I mean, let's face it. I think the vast majority of people who would be using such community would also be neurodivergent. And I think that's part of what surprises me that nothing has sprung up like that yet. Because, you've got all these neurodivergent people who there's a chance they've been involved with, say, the autistic community. And yet
Mm.
none of us have stopped to go like, let's build more community around our mental health and our well-being. And perhaps, I don't know, do you think maybe it's because we feel we already do that with the autistic community? what would you see as the difference between like a mental health community and a neurodivergent community?
I don't know. That's a really hard one. Um, I mean, yeah, it's really hard to say because I I don't personally know any autistic people who don't also have mental health issues, anyways.
Yeah,
And then obviously mental health is neurodivergent, um, anyway, so it's kind of hard to say. Um, mm, I don't know. There's not like there's mad pride does exist,
it
right?
does.
But it's not. It's quite small from the very small amount I know about it. Whereas autistic pride is a lot. I don't know if being autistic and being ADHD, um, having cerebral palsy, being Down syndrome, whatever, is makes up like a lot more of someone's personal identity or the way that they experience the world, much more so than their mental health. I don't know if mental health is something that people want to identify with.
I
Um,
can, I can see that.
like, I can see why people wouldn't want to. Like, I share that I'm OCD all the time because of the people I'm around. Like, it makes sense for me. But if there was an OCD group to go to, would I want to go to that group? I don't know, because OCD loves loves company. And if I think, oh, these people have got certain things that they're doing, my OCD is like taking notes, like, oh, that's a good one. I'll get them with that later.
Yeah.
Oh, that's oh, wow, that's a really so I feel like there's an element for me personally where I would find an OCD group really quite difficult, or possibly actually not helpful to me at all. Um, yeah, I suppose it's if you want to have the common denominator between you and and other people that you hang around with to be mental health. I mean, I suppose also another difference is that with being autistic, there is a culture there. Which I
Mm.
don't know if there is with mental health. I don't know.
You see, I'm quite
Um,
influenced by the mad pride sort of idea.
mm,
And for me, there is definitely an emerging sort of culture there. It's
okay.
one that I think it could do with being more accessible. And I personally think that there are not just parallels between Mad Pride and the neurodiversity movement, there are direct overlaps.
Mm,
For example, like I speak of Mad Pride a fair bit on my Substack writing, and for me, like being schizophrenic is an identity
okay.
because it's a part of my neurodivergence, and not all neurodivergence has to be wow. I'm so excited to have that, like because it can be really really crappy at times.
Mm,
But for me, mad pride is it's the same as autistic pride. I refuse to be ashamed because the world wants me to be ashamed. That's the way neuronormative society works.
mm,
Hide it away, keep it quiet, deal
mm,
with it on your own. And I don't think I should have to be quiet about it because this is my experience of this life, which by the way I didn't ask for. Like,
mm,
so why can't I share with people that actually, do you know what? It gets really crap at times, but
mm.
also it's part of what makes me the person that you're seeing today.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, I suppose it's also because uh, mental health has to kind of like originate somewhere, doesn't it? Right.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, and so much of that is going to be from trauma and neglect and abuse and various other things. So, it's pride in survival. Is that like even
I
a right thing to say? I don't know.
I think there can be pride in survival because I mean, let's face it, autistic people again, you know, one of the reasons we are so likely to have mental health issues is probably because there is such a high rate of trauma in our community. You
Mm,
know, it comes at us from all angles. You know, even if you think you've managed to go your whole life without being traumatized, it's like the little trauma monsters hiding around the corner. Um, and you know, at some point, all of us experience something traumatic. I'm pretty sure of that. I don't have research to support that, but anecdotally, I haven't met an autistic person who hasn't experienced at least one traumatic thing.
mm,
And I
mm,
think we can take pride in the fact that we survived it. But I think also because it alters our brain, but it's something we didn't want that is altering our brain, it's that because it feels like we've had our autonomy taken from us.
mm, mm, mm. But something more to, I really don't want to use the word resilient. I really don't want to use the word resilient. But it's something to push back against.
Yeah,
So my obsessive compulsive has come from wherever my depression, my anxiety, my various other things going on with me. It's just um, they've come from somewhere. And to say this is who I am and this is what I experience is a kind of fuck you to where it's come from.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I can understand that. I can appreciate that.
yeah,
Yeah, I just don't know what that looks like community wise. Yeah, I don't know.
yeah. And Kitty actually says there are some mental health communities that use it as a primary identifier, and others who seem less likely or opposed to it. I witness more distancing language for other mental health diagnoses used for mental health, even within the autistic and
Mm,
ADHD community.
mm, mm.
And
Yeah.
you know, I'm going to say something now, which we're talking about mental health and neurodivergent people. Some people probably won't appreciate this. There is a lot of cluster B hate in the autistic community.
Oh, 100%. Yes.
Like cluster B personality disorders, like they take a lot of heat, especially in the autistic community, I find. Now, that's not to say that everyone with a cluster B personality disorder, so not every autistic person is perfect. Like, you know, bad things can happen. People can do bad things. People can be associated with negative things. I don't think it's fair to reduce entire diagnoses bad outcomes because it fundamentally undermines. And someone's asking, Maddie Black Lives Matter is asking what cluster B is. Cluster. So in personality disorders, you have cluster A, cluster B, and cluster C. Cluster B is personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder. Um, those personality disorders in particular tend to get the blame for a lot of the abuse that goes on. And yet, there probably is some evidence that there are relationships between those diagnoses and the perpetration of abuse. But it's a give and take, like with any diagnosis. You know, I'm schizophrenic. My diagnosis is linked to mass violence and things, but it doesn't mean that I am inherently a dangerous person because I have that diagnosis.
Mm, mm,
You know, recent of links between various mental health conditions and various negative outcomes, but there is more to it than just the diagnosis. You know,
mm,
it has a lot to do with the environment of one's life, the setting of one's life as to how that diagnosis will play out. And I
mm,
think people forget that sometimes.
mm. Yeah, absolutely. I've had to follow, yeah, a lot of pages and various people for just kind of um, talking about abuse, which is absolutely not a problem, but always linking it back to narcissistic abuse and like just trying to continuously tell people um, that the usage of that word is perhaps not quite the word you were looking for, or perhaps might not be too helpful for some of the people following your page, and just being shot down quite a lot because I think people, um, as an abuse survivor myself, I'm just telling people not to talk about abuse, and that's not the point I'm getting at. I also find that with the word obsessed as well. People use the word obsessed all the time, and I was like, if
Yeah,
you just even understood what obsession actually was, you would not be using that word all the time. So it's just, um, just those. Yeah, there's a lot of problems in autistic and ADHD communities, definitely. Notwithstanding racism as well, and misogyny, and
Yeah,
all sorts of other colourful, wonderful things.
and I'm glad you brought up people using mental health conditions and terminology as colloquialisms, because one that really annoys me is when someone's like, "Oh, you went schizo." I'm like, No, he didn't. You have no idea what that word means, and
Mm,
also that's not the full word. Like, you mean schizophrenic, and it has nothing to do with losing your temper." Like,
mhm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I find that most of those words are again kind of put towards women or people who are perceived as women. Just, oh, she's crazy. Oh, they're hysterical. Oh, psycho woman. Oh, all this kind of thing.
yeah, and
Yeah.
a lot of these colloquialisms, I don't think people realize when they use them, they are literally aiding in the oppression of multiple minority groups all at once. Because, there is a gendered history to it, there's an ableist history to it, there's racist history to it, and these colloquialisms that have developed the steel terminology from mental health conditions, they are all rooted, deeply rooted in forms of oppression.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. So it's difficult to read that stuff. And I've probably done very similar in the past, I have no doubt. Yeah, so it's just yeah, just being about more thoughtful about how we use words and stuff, isn't it? But the more we learn, the better we do, isn't it? So
Yeah,
um
and
but yeah, if people could stop using obsessed, that'd be amazing.
that would. And Jenny Coyne says, if I'm not mistaken, these stereotypes come from films depicting mental health conditions in one way and often choosing the most dramatic terms for the sake of keeping people engaged in said film.
Mm,
There is a lot to be said here. There's so much to
mm,
unpack because the media, in not just the way mental health is seen, but neurodivergent people as well. Like, you know,
mm.
I mean, we always talk about, for example, what's a bad example of autistic people? Rain Man, Sheldon Cooper. But actually, it goes further than that because the layer of mental health, which you've got so many films which center mental health as this dangerous other that needs to be controlled and contained. And it's really harmful. And yet people see it as entertainment.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I find things is it Silence of the Lambs where the person makes a skin suit for themselves?
Yeah.
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 Is it Red Dragon? Jay's correcting me. Um but one of those films was a person who was considered trans who would probably have been called transvestite at that time, I would have thought. And was creating a skin suit for themselves in order for them to have a woman's body and stuff. And I'm just like, wow, this is just really kind of hitting it on like multivarious
And
points
yeah, I
here,
was going to say again, it's not just one group of people they're targeting with that. Like that's there's various forms of oppression all in that one representation.
Buffalo Bill, that's right.
Interestingly, I saw a film recently called Fear of Rain, and other people might have a different opinion, but the main character is schizophrenic, and she's just come out of a psychiatric ward. She believes that her neighbor has kidnapped a child. And the whole film, everyone's telling her you're having a psychotic episode, and it turns out that she was correct, and the neighbor had actually, kidnapped a child. And I really liked that because one of the things I experience as a schizophrenic is if I get worried about something, people automatically jump to it's a delusion. There's this assumption made that every wild theory I have must be part of schizophrenia. But actually, I'm a human being. I do have feelings that aren't delusions.
Mm.
Like, and I think that are there any particular misnomers about OCD, for example, that really annoy you?
Oh, there's millions. There are so many. Um, yeah, the idea that. it's to do with germs. It's to do with germs and cleanliness and things being just right. Um, and that is OCD for some people. Also, people use the word OCD to mean clean or tidy all the time, and it's so frustrating. Yeah, I just think people, yeah, I think they see Monica Geller off Friends, and they think, this is OCD. I don't know that if she was ever said to have OCD, or whether that was ever a joke on the program or what it was. Obviously, Friends is a massively problematic program, anyways. But yeah, there's this idea that it's a kind of clean freak, you know, um, condition, which is true for some people, but for an awful lot more of us, it's just not the case whatsoever. And it's not just about the cleanliness and the checking of things. It's all the and how time consuming that is, and how if you've started one place and you've been interrupted somehow, you've got to start all over again, and how long things can take to do that. It's also to do with the thoughts that you have in your head as well, like, and if I don't do this, like, my whole family's going to die, or if I don't do this, then something really awful is going to happen to my child, or if I don't do this, then XYZ. You have to live with that all day, every day. That's really hard, heavy shit to live with. And people just think, oh, you just like to clean your hands, and they just think, oh, it's really, there's a real again, the media has not helped with that. There's like a real downsizing of it. Like, it's not really a thing.
I had the trigger warning. I'm going to talk about one of my delusions in a fair bit of detail here. But during one of my episodes, I believed that I was trapped in a computer simulation. But my OCD did this fun sort of tag team thing with it, and was like, if you don't compulsively pray, even though you don't believe in God, if you don't compulsively pray, you're going to be deleted from the simulation and cease existence.
Oh,
Like, that's OCD. Like, that's not like I actually haven't met a person with OCD. I don't know which one people prefer. I think it's 50-50 really, isn't it? But,
yeah. Oh, I don't mind whatever.
I've never met a person with OCD who actually has time to be a neat freak when their compulsions are kicking off. Like, and I know, that's just one person's experience, but I don't actually understand where I think it must be the media again, really, because that seems to be at the root of most of the misunderstandings of mental health.
They had a program called OCD Cleaners, and yeah, just different stuff like that. Just, yeah, especially around women and people perceived as women.
Yeah,
Around we're expected to clean a house, but if we clean it too much, then obviously we're crazy.
yeah.
Obviously, there's something wrong with
There
us.
is
So
so much.
again, the cleanliness and the tidiness of somewhere has to be clean and it has to be tidy.
There is a huge
But
amount of
there's a
misogyny
line
tied
there,
up. Yeah,
and once you cross that line, you crazy.
yeah,
Yeah, and it's just not again very much directed towards non-men, basically.
yeah. And there is a great deal of sort of misogyny and transphobia tied up in mental health because, I mean, let's be blunt here. You have to have a psychiatric diagnosis to get gender affirming care in most countries. You have to be diagnosed with gender dysphoria. Like, some mental health stuff, I I would argue shouldn't even be considered a mental illness. Like,
Mm. Mm.
like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like,
Yeah,
you
there's
know,
tons of stuff, you know.
if you read the DSM cover to cover, some of the stuff you're seeing there is wild because they're just describing how is this a pathology. Like,
Mm.
and I'll be honest, I've read most of the DSM, and sometimes I sit there and I'm like, how is anyone in existence who doesn't have a diagnosed mental health problem
Yeah,
based on this book?
yeah, basically, yeah. 100%. And the ICD is just as bad, really. But Yeah, I mean, it's the same with, gender, because it was gender identity disorder, wasn't it?
Yeah,
And now it's gender dysphoria. Um, and it's really difficult to get care when you're not considered to have gender dysphoria. Um, so yeah, that's a really, really difficult one. So you have to be diagnosed with that. But it's very difficult to be diagnosed with that if you're also diagnosed autistic.
yeah,
So like a lot of people have to, and I've probably said this to you about a million times, David, but like you have to kind of choose between whether you're going to go through your autistic diagnosis, if that's what you need and that's what you want, or your gender identity healthcare. Because you ain't getting both, or if you are, it's going to be an even longer wait. Because they
yeah,
just don't like you were saying about people not believing you because you're schizophrenic, and obviously every idea you've ever had obviously has to be to do with that. It's the same with being autistic. Like, oh well, you would have these weird thoughts about gender because you're autistic. So obviously that's just like, just
but
totally
this is
part
something
of
that
it, isn't it?
it needs to be addressed the way that, I mean, talking about healthcare broadly, mental health
Mm,
conditions box you out of a lot of healthcare.
mm,
As a schizophrenic autistic, God forbid I ever need like a organ transplant, like, because I'm much less likely to make my way up a transplant list because I'm schizophrenic, for example. Like
mm,
there are countries that will refuse you transplants if you're autistic or schizophrenic. In fact, in the UK, I know only a few years ago there was a big to do in the media over a child who needed, I think it was kidney transplants, who was being refused on the grounds that they were autistic. It was all over the news. I can't remember. They did name people in it. If I find it, I will post a link to
yeah,
it on my page. But
yeah,
it was a few years ago. There was a huge thing about this child. They have a right to have these transplants, and they shouldn't be denied it just because they're autistic. But this is the thing about the psychiatric diagnoses. They are often used to say, well, this person shouldn't be given that treatment arbitrarily because they're mentally ill, and there's this attitude that mentally ill people are worth less
mm,
than people who are not mentally ill. And that's one of the things that I really dislike. And yeah, Maddie, Black Lives Matter, just said, this is a good example. Even during COVID, we were letting people die because of their diagnosis. That's
absolutely.
one that's really easy to bring up. There is the DNAR orders that were being signed, the do not attempt resuscitation. It was I some how it's almost like the world is so horrible to mentally ill people or
Mm,
people with a neurodivergence that it actually creates more mental illness from the horror of watching the world unfold.
yeah, absolutely. Whereas if people just got, the health professionals are always talking about um, early intervention, early intervention. They use that all the time with autistic diagnosis and stuff like that. Yeah, they don't want to do that for mental health. Like,
No, it's crisis
you
driven.
have to be at complete and utter crisis, have hurt yourself, have tried to take your life, have, like some real serious business before people even begin to take you seriously. And then even then there's like wait lists
Yeah,
and wait lists. But it's all right because in the meantime we can have a hot bath and go for a walk.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Amazing.
love stewing in testicle
It's
tea.
really, really useful. Thank you for all of that. Um Yeah, and then when you put other things in that, I can imagine learning disabled people, get so much barriers with healthcare, with mental health care. Oh my goodness, non-speaking people I would have thought as well. How it also affects older people quite a lot as
Mm.
well. Especially, yeah, again with COVID. Like, so if you were old and disabled in COVID, like, you know, sorry, I'm saying that as if COVID doesn't still exist, but
Yeah,
like it's real scary business.
yeah, yeah,
Um, because not only are you seen as useless because you're disabled, but you're also seen as useless because you're older. Because basically they just want people to work, and if you're not going to work, then I'm not going to give you a kidney or I'm not going to resuscitate you, or I'm not going to, because what are you going to do for me? Well, it's just like, why's humanity come down to that?
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack. It's a lot to process. And I'm aware we're sort of coming to the end of an hour, and we've been talking about some really heavy stuff.
Mm.
So we don't always have to, sandwich the heavy stuff with positive stuff, but I feel like we should. So trying to think of something positive. We're still here. And I think a lot of us are working to make the world a better place, even when it's not been particularly kind to us. And that's
Mm.
one thing I will always be proud of for my neurodivergent neurokin who experience mental health issues. If there's one thing I'm sure of that's pretty unique to neurodivergent people, um, it's that we will constantly strive to try and make things better. We rarely are satisfied with just letting things be the way they are.
I think I especially like that with I don't know what kind of parenting they call it, but is it gentle parenting? Is that the word I'm looking for?
Probably, yeah.
Where it's basically just not being a dick to a child.
Yeah.
Basically, I know that's like confusing to some people, but yeah, I think this generation of autistic people, I don't know whether that makes sense, but it seems to be something that I'm seeing a lot of, about how to co-regulate, how to give autonomy to your child, how to take them and follow their needs and stuff like that. And I'm hoping with that and more people, because we didn't even touch on the education system today, but Jesus Christ, with that, even just all of that information now. So if my young man goes into the school system and it really doesn't work for him, like, I know that there's enough resources and there's enough groups out there specifically about autistic parenting and homeschooling of probable autistic children. That's a fantastic thing that we have.
And that really is one of the beautiful things about the autistic community is there is a level of mutual aid going on, because even if we're not helping each other out financially, we're producing resources, we're creating knowledge, we are tearing down barriers.
Mm,
And I think that's really, really important, because I think one of the issues that, say, autistic people from the 90s and prior have struggled with is there were so many barriers. There was not much in the way of resources. Autism was said in
mm,
hushed tones, as was our mental health issues. Um, but we're moving into a world now where people are opening up. We are co-creating things. We are coming together to affect change, something that's really important.
absolutely, absolutely. Because a conversation like this wouldn't have happened, couldn't have happened.
Yeah.
Dial up internet and everything else. And then even before that, like, there's just, yeah, online for people to go back to if they want to, or join in the conversation elsewhere, or relate to something or resonate with something. Like, that's a really important thing for me personally, with the autistic communities that I'm part of online. Like, and mental health stuff they shared through the autistic communities online, is there's just like, I'm not the only person who does that, or I do that, and this person's got, like, because they're autistic, got like 20 different ideas on how to combat that or help with that or support that in some way. Which if I'd been born, 20 years prior or whatever, I just wouldn't have access to that.
And
And still wouldn't be diagnosed. So,
say what you will about social media, it's a really important thing for neurodivergent people, I think.
yeah, for a great deal of us, I would say so, yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, it's about time to wrap up. So thank you very much. It's been a really good episode. I've really enjoyed this. And I'm hoping that all the people who've listened this evening live have enjoyed it. And certainly anyone listening after it's been live to when it's recorded. Thank you for tuning in, all of you. And As always, this has been David's Divergent Discussions. I've been here with Katie Munday talking about neurodivergence and mental health as part of mental health awareness. Next week, I believe, I have Rachel Gavin again, and we'll be talking about the new mental health bill. We might be getting into why it's not necessarily all it's cracked up to be, because there's been a lot of talk around what it's going to achieve, and I think there's certainly some questions as to whether it's going to achieve exactly what they say it's going to. But in the meantime, thank you for listening, and I will catch you all in the next episode. Goodbye.